Welcome to this seasonal episode of the Informing Choices mini-pod. In this episode, I'm talking to 5 futurist friends of the podcast to explore what might happen in 2025. In a world brimming with complexity and uncertainty, my expert guests will each share their biggest hope and deepest fear for the year ahead. Will they talk about groundbreaking technological breakthroughs or pressing societal challenges? I'm sure that whatever they speak about, their perspectives will inspire, provoke, and illuminate as they reflect on the possibilities ahead of us in 2025. So join us on this engaging journey into the near future, a conversation designed to spark thought, dialogue, and perhaps even action. So, in this episode of the pod, I'm going to be joined by renowned Houston-based futurist Alexandra Whittington, with strategic communicator and futurist Gina Clifford, with futurist strategist and keynote speaker Joana Lenkova, futurist keynote speaker Rohit Talwar, and design futurist Trisha Mehta. The question I'm asking each of my guests is this. Firstly, what's your biggest hope for 2025? And secondly, what's your biggest fear for the year ahead? Let's hear what they have to say.
It is always a pleasure to contribute to the Informing Choices mini-pod, hosted by Steve Wells, one of the most dynamic futurists and thinkers in my network. I'm Gina Clifford, and I'm sharing my take on the most fearful and most hopeful possible developments that we might see by the end of 2025. I'll start with what I call the war on women. In 2024, women around the world experienced some of the most restrictive laws and violence imaginable. In Afghanistan, the Taliban removed almost every freedom for women, including attending schools and universities, working outside the home, and even going to beauty salons or even looking at a man. In Kenya, misogynistic hate speech online fueled gruesome murders of women as social media followers rationalized their crimes as ways to punish women who were not embracing traditional female roles. Even more troubling, 3/4 of these murders were committed by men who knew their victims. There's also a war on women brewing in the US. As US maternal mortality rates rise so rapidly that now the US claims the highest maternal mortality rate anywhere amongst developed countries. There's also political violence against women. Women in local elective offices in the US are targeted with threats and harassment 3.4 times more than men. If this trend continues into 2025, we're likely to experience a much more misogynistic world. We'll see a bleaker and crueler society in 2025 as we continue to limit rights and freedoms of 50% of our human population. As this trend continues into 2025, and there isn't any sign that it will likely abate, the world will become poorer, less empathetic, less safe. It isn't the world I want to build. But 2025 won't be all doom and gloom. I think AI will play a big part in helping us reimagine the way we work. One of the most promising developments in 2025 will be the non-trivial applications of artificial intelligence. I'm not talking about using generative AI to create your PowerPoint images or even PowerPoints. I mean, organizations are right now using AI to accelerate advancements in everything from material science to drug design and supply chain optimization. There's been so much hype and paranoia around AI over the past few years, but many companies really are showing significant use cases and very real value. I know one software as a service company that is using AI to immediately find millions of dollars of cost savings in supply chain procurement data. If government regulations mature and build reasonable guardrails around AI, 2025 might be the year the argument over work from home versus return to office becomes irrelevant. As AI becomes the much bigger value driver, right? In other words, work from wherever works for you. But wherever you do, whatever you do, wherever you work, tap into AI. As rapidly as AI is advancing, it isn't difficult to imagine that every one of us has some sort of AI assistant embedded in every part of our world. Will this fully happen in 2025? Probably not. But the seed has been planted, and 2025 just might be the inflection point toward exponential value creation from AI. Thank you.
My hope for 2025 is that we transition from reactive systems to regenerative ones. I think decentralized energy and biodiversity linked finances are examples of how innovation can sort of empower communities while preserving the planet. So I think if we continue on that path, in a well thought of way, of course, 2025 could be a turning point towards equitable and more inclusive progress. On the other hand, I think I fear about fragmentation, whether it's geopolitical, digital, or social. I think one alarming possibility I sometimes think about, especially before I go to bed, is ecofascism, which you know everything about. And it's something that especially has sparked a lot of internal debate in my mind since our last conversation, where I think sustainability will become a pretext for exclusion. So, for example, urban mobility systems designed without accessibility could widen divides rather than bridge them. So I think if systemic inequities aren't addressed, we are at a deep risk of deepening global disparities, which I think, unfortunately, has already started to manifest in many industries in many parts of the world. And I guess I would like to give a little bit of closing reflection as I think about these two, that in 2025, I think the interplay between resilience and fragmentation will define our global narrative. The question is whether we can align innovation, governance, and equity to build a truly inclusive future. I hope we can, but I do fear that we might not, we might realize too late that we need to do that. So, yeah, thank you for having me on this journey of reflection, and I can't wait to hear what others share.
So my biggest hope for 2025 is that through the turbulence of world wars and environmental crisis, the world does come to an awakening that we need new models of working together to solve some of our biggest crises, and that these extend beyond politics to laying a real foundation for how we want to be in the future in a world enabled by AI. And that could involve how we address things like climate change, biodiversity issues, and global conflict. I think it's time, and I'm very hopeful that by the end of the year at least, we'll start to have a new dialogue around how we work together to address these issues. My biggest fear for 2025, and there are many, and I've struggled to prioritize them, but I would say perhaps at the biggest level is that either of the two conflicts in Ukraine or in the Middle East erupt into something much bigger. And potentially this idea that we end up with a new kind of conflict between Russia and the NATO allies, involving cyber, involving covert action, and maybe even direct kinetic action that could lead to paralysis in a lot of cases, and maybe even some economies collapsing.
2025 is more than just another year. It's a turning point. It's the year that marks the beginning of Generation Beta, often dubbed the Artificials. Why? Because they'll be the first generation to be born into a world fully immersed in artificial intelligence. Not just as a novelty, but as the norm. This isn't only about smarter gadgets or better algorithms. It's about how AI as well as the lack of access to AI, shapes the world these children will inherit. And of course, with every new beginning comes both hope and fear. My hope for 2025 is rooted in this idea of new beginnings. The new generation always brings fresh perspectives, but this particular one will be different. Those with access to AI will have it as their co-pilot. They'll have access to knowledge, tools, creativity like no generation before them. Imagine kids who never have to wait for an answer, who can create solutions, create their own stories, and actually be the main character in them. And on the way, shaping their own identity by testing and pushing boundaries and seeing the consequences of their actions real time. But it's not just about technology, of course, it's about potential. And I'm really hopeful that with these smarter tools, not just this generation, but all of us who care about the future could be more empathetic, more creative, more equipped to solve the wicked problems we've been trying to solve and couldn't before. If we get it right, 2025 could be remembered as the beginning of a generation that's not only connected, but more empowered than ever before. With every hope comes some fear. And my biggest fear for 2025 is loneliness and division. Access to technology is not going to be ubiquitous. The digital divide persists. And even with the access to the latest tech, the irony is that in a world where we're more connected than ever, many of us are feeling more isolated. When everyone is living in their own customized reality, our shared experiences shrink and we stop seeing the same world. On a bigger scale, we're also walking into a storm of social division. The 24 US election was just one example, and it's likely to leave behind division, not unity. These rifts don't just go away, they are reinforced by the algorithms that drive our media, our conversations, and even our relationships. By 2025, we could be living in a world that's more connected digitally, but more divided emotionally. My fear is that despite all the progress we've made, we could feel lonelier and more isolated and more divided than ever before. But I'd like to end on a positive note, and I am hopeful. I hope that 2025 is a new beginning. It's a beginning for AI-human relationships. It's a beginning for AI-free experiences, for a generation better, for all of us. And as Mandela once said, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. Happy New Year.
Hello, I'm here to share with you my greatest hope and greatest fear for 2025. And in fact, I've chosen a topic that is really just two sides of the same coin. For 2025, in light of the aging population and declining birth rate, there's a clear need for assistive technology for people with disabilities, for aging people, and for people with a variety of different needs. Assistive technology has advanced a great deal over the past several decades, and especially in the past couple of years. We now have things like smart skin, things like bionic limbs that use AI, and of course, a range of, Internet of Things and connected objects and gadgets that can help people live independently and have better quality of life. At the same time, some of these same technologies, like AI and like smart things, tend to put at risk sometimes fairness and equality, which we know is really important to ensuring for people with disabilities and also for older people. Some of the most vulnerable members of society may be face to face with technologies that can be used to manipulate them or take advantage of them, or in fact decrease their quality of life. So I look at this topic of assistive technology and accessibility technology as a positive and a negative. And in 2025, given some of the demographic changes that are in store, it may be the year that we start to see a lot of these issues, questions, and concerns start to come to some resolution, or to reach some tipping point where we understand not just the benefits and not just the risks, but the social implications for technology that is designed to help people meet their needs or enhance their quality of life in some way.
So what have we heard from my 5 guests? Let's start with their fears. We heard about division, fragmentation and conflict across geopolitical, digital and social domains. We heard about ongoing nature of pervasive misogyny and stagnation of changes in gender equality in leadership positions. We heard about the paradox presented by potential of technologies to provide significant benefit to humanity, but their misuse actually risking fairness, equity, loneliness, and division. But what about hopes for 2025? We heard about the hope for increasing regenerative and collaborative working models to drive sustainable economic, environmental, and social growth. We heard about the combination of emerging technologies and a generational shift in attitudes to how technology is used to empower people to drive positive outcomes. The question is, what are your hopes and fears for 2025? Thank you for listening and watching, and thank you, of course, to my 5 guests. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of the Informing Choices mini-pod, and do tell your friends and colleagues all about the podcast. It only remains for me to wish you a very happy and prosperous 2025.